I'd like to wish you a happy new year. Welcome to 2022. Hopefully, you're able to get away over the holidays and spend time with family and friends. Now that 21 is in the books, let's talk a little bit about what happened last year. We still had COVID. It was still with us throughout the year, and actually, we got a new strain, the Omicron strain, here at the end of the year. Um, but in spite of that, we saw consumers come back, beginning to get back out to restaurants and more service-oriented travel type things again. So we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. But the second phase of COVID was experiences, services, and we really began to see that last year. Inflation became a real issue last year, and that was a lot to do with the demand, the post-recession demand, along with the supply chain constraints that we experienced this year. And we'll talk about that because I think as we move through this year, we'll see that begin to wane. So I think we can say 21 was about continuation of COVID, record equity returns, continuation of this market recovery that goes back to March of 2020. It's just been amazing to see how equity markets, how strong they've been. Also, the consumer and inflation. I also want to touch on just a little bit now that we've had a full year to really look back at this COVID recession. I thought we'd take just a minute and talk about it because we've never experienced anything quite like it in recent history, anyways. We've had recessions, but we've never just shut the global economy off, overnight like we did. And it was a different type of recession than we normally see, where companies try to keep people on or their employees on as long as they possibly can, cutting expenses elsewhere. And the last cuts they make typically are people. Well, with the COVID recession, especially in the service industry, when you had to shut your business down, you couldn't afford to pay your people. So companies just let employees go. And the second thing we saw was the government stepping in like we've never seen step in before with enhanced unemployment benefits. And for many employees, it was better for them to take the unemployment benefits than it was for them to stay at work. So we've never had a spike in unemployment like we did last year. Excuse me, actually, in 2020 during the COVID recession. We've never seen anything like that before, nor have we seen anything like the immediacy of the government response, both to the economy, to small business, and also to households. If you look back to the three stimulus checks that went out, a family of four received about $10,000. And when you look at all this spending, where have people gotten the money from? Well, the stimulus checks. Many people continue to work just from home. Those that were unemployed, many of them were actually receiving more in unemployment benefits than they were while they were working. So people had money during this recession to continue to spend. And again, we've never seen a recession like this. And with some of the stimulus package money went back to states and to cities. So you've had a big part of our economy come through this recession very healthy. So what we saw the second half of 2020 and then into last year, just this recovery, we knew it was going to come. Just locking people down for months on end, we knew that they would come back, and they came back in a big way. And I think what we'll see as we look out then into the 22 is we're going to see more of the services, just an explosion in services, because people are going to travel more. I fully expect to see more of the world open up. Before I get too far into 22, I want to talk a little bit about labor markets. We've heard so much about, where have all the employees gone since COVID, and people are coming back. But one of the realities that really was accelerated during COVID is this demographic trend that we've been experiencing here in the US, and it just accelerated that. And that's the retirement of the baby boomers. And this Gen Z, which is the generation following the millennials, is a smaller generation. And just to give you an idea, in 2020, we had 500,000 less 18-year-olds than we did just 10 years earlier. So we're going to go through a whole generation where we've got less new young people coming into the workforce. On top of that, we have the baby boomers retiring. And in 2020, we had an additional 1.3 million baby boomers retire on top of the normal trend lines. So we lost just in that one year almost 2 million workers from the workforce. and we will have 500,000 less coming into the labor force each and every year. So these labor market shortages are real, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it here before I finish. But I think as we look into this year, I think what we're going to see is COVID is going to become less lethal, but it's going to still be with us. And the media is not going to drop this. We saw with the Omicron variant that came out here in the fall, there was a little bit of a downturn in some of the service industries, but it didn't last long. And I think people are just tired. People want to get back to doing things. And I think this is going to be the year that we see it spread around the globe. Many countries have still been locked down. So I don't want to say my predictions, but what I just see happening is just an explosion in services and travel, a reopening of the global economy, and not just here in the US, but other places around the world. These labor shortages are going to be real. And one of the things that with working remotely that we've talked a lot about here in the US is people now can live in Kansas and work for an LA firm or maybe a New York City firm. But the reality of this is this opens up the entire world. So we've seen a lot in the engineering industry where engineering firms hire engineers from India. You have a very educated labor force. They just happen to be in India, not here. And I think what we're going to start to see is basically the global workforce, labor force open up to companies. And it's going to be a real changer or a game changer. So that will be something very interesting to watch as we're dealing with labor shortages here in the US. I think we see supply chain issues get resolved. Just number one, it's in the best interest of companies to get inventories restocked. And actually in the fourth quarter, that was a lot of what was happening is companies restocking inventories. So I think we'll see the supply chain issues beginning to get resolved, which will help inflation. I think there's going to be some wage inflation along with energy inflation, but I think we'll see that beginning to ease. A big topic is going to be the Federal Reserve Bank tightening monetary policy, which means raising rates, unwinding many of these policies that were put into place during the recession. You'll hear the end of quantitative easing, things of that nature, but I think we'll see that happen. And typically as the Fed begins to tighten monetary policy, it creates more volatility in the equity market. It can also cause some bumps in the economy. So I do expect to see some volatility, which we really haven't had any or very little of since March of 2020. And we can't predict what equities are going to do, and we can just look back on this last year, and it's just been such a good example of if somebody would have stood on January 1st and known what was going to happen this past year, they probably would have just panicked out of equities. And we can't. We know we can't predict what the markets are going to do in the short term. But as part of your plan, part of our strategy, we know that we're going to have volatility and we plan for it. So in ending my thoughts, I just want to say we're looking forward to getting together with you here the first half of this year and talking about your economy and looking at your plan as well. So if you have any comments or follow-on questions, please reach out to us. I always love following up with all of you. And again, I'd like to wish you a Happy New Year from all of us here. Thank you.